Well, ladies and gentlemen, we have a rare treat here today. We're over visiting with Mr. W.H. Bill Jordan, and he has been a legendary figure to myself and many of the readers of the firearms magazines for many years, and I'm happy to report that he is just as nice an individual as you get the impression from reading his column. So we're so appreciative of being in his home today, and we're going to visit with him just for a few minutes, and he's going to show us some of his favorite firearms. And sir, I want to say thanks again for allowing us to come over today and visit with you, and I know that a lot of our viewers are really going to enjoy our conversation with you.
Well, real glad to be here, Johnny.
Well, absolutely.
And I mean that, because at 82 years old, every morning you're glad to be here.
I told him the other day, I said, if I'm in half his condition, if I live to reach his age, well, I'll be extremely happy about that, because, you know, we commented a moment ago, both of us in the same picture, we sort of fill it up there. Well, anyway, he's going to show us some guns here, and we're going to hear some stories. And we're just so glad to have him on camera today. And needless to say, most of the people who read Mr. Jordan, in fact, he told me to call him Bill earlier, are very familiar with a lot of the things he has done in the past. To give you just a little bit of background on Bill Jordan, he was Border Patrolman in the Marine Corps, and back to the Border Patrol, I think back to the Marine Corps one time, and has done a lot of work for the National Rifle Association as far as being a field representative, has done exhibition shooting in many different areas, has done a lot of television in past years. And let me tell you what, he still today is an active shooter and hunter, and certainly one of my very favorite gun writers of all time. So tell us, sir, what's that, show us that handgun over on your desk there, please. And tell us what that is.
Johnny, this was a gun that I was on the board of directors for the National Rifle Association. The president and one of his officials of Smith & Wesson showed up with this gun. Many years before, I had talked with another president about, he wanted to know what my idea of the ideal handgun for a law enforcement officer would be. And I told him exactly what I had in mind. And by golly, they came out with it, and they called it the Combat Magnum. It was a lighter frame 357 Magnum. It has become, I believe, the most popular gun that they've ever made, and there have been many offshoots from it in the same frame, but that they call by a different name. But still the same size gun, the same general everything, except for a little bit of modification for special occasions or special uses. But they presented me with this gun. It's really a beautiful gun. See if I can get it out of here.
Let me see if I can get a close-up on that.
All right. You notice that the hammer is tied down. That's because this is by way of being quite a collector's item, and if someone picked it up and snapped the trigger, snapped the hammer, it would leave some marks there on the cylinder, which would knock its value as a collector's item. And I didn't want that to happen, so I've got this hammer tied down so it can't come back. It's really a beautiful piece of work as a firearm.
Oh, it really is. It really is.
By the way, the grips were my design too. They even had these grips made up using my design when they made this gun up. And along with it, this is a facsimile of the letter that came, a small copy of the letter that came with it. So of course it's something that I'm real proud of, and I don't plan to part with this one. I did part with the first one of the Combat Magnums, but somebody wanted a whole lot more than I could stand, so I didn't have it.
You know, friends, I get to stand behind the camera on interviews sometimes, and it's so enjoyable. So we're just going to have a little conversation here with Bill Jordan and ask his opinion. And let me tell you what, his opinion does carry some weight, because this is one man who has been there and has really has depended upon a handgun in many instances to protect his own life and the lives of others. So tell me, Bill, what's your feeling of law enforcement switching over from the revolver to the semi-automatic?
Well, Johnny, I'm really pretty unhappy about it because I know one thing two things I think that are pretty obvious. One is that except for a very few very dedicated people, most law enforcement officers are trying to buy something with the automatic that they don't have with the double action revolver, and that's a great big magazine capacity and the ability to shoot it without a whole lot of training. And they think that they can buy what they would have to work really hard to do with the double action revolver. But what they're overlooking is this: in the game that they're playing with, let's say, cooks and police and robbers or whatever, they're playing for keeps. And it's not a business of bang, you lay down and then you get up and walk away. The double action revolver is the only one that you really can depend on. If an automatic, let's go to the double action automatics, which sound great. If you pull the trigger on one of those and you happen to have a dead primer under that hammer, it's going to snap. Then you're dead in the water. All you can do is keep pulling that trigger, or else you ought to be real fast at slapping the hammer some way, and hit that slide back. And in the meantime, the guy with the double action revolver, if it don't fire on the first one, he just stands there and pulls it some more. You come up with a dead one with the automatic, a dead problem, he comes up with a fresh deal. And how long you figure you got to last under those type conditions?
And I do want to mention, of course, Bill Jordan's great book, No Second Place Winner, which is in publication today. It was written a number of years ago, but it's still as factual and worth as much as it was when it was first written, because it has some real thinking involved on the approach to buying guns and personal protection. We highly recommend it. Now, Bill, what would your recommendation be for a new shooter? You know, a lot of people who watch our programs are new shooters. They're buying guns and they haven't owned guns before. A lot of people, especially women, are buying handguns. So someone with all your experience could be a lot of help, or at least give some advice to some of our viewers. So what would you recommend that a new shooter start with as far as handguns for home protection?
Well, if you're speaking of a woman and a man, of course, you might have two different recommendations because a woman's smaller hand. I would certainly go for one of the small revolvers, such as the Lady Smith, maybe a 32 Special, or I believe they got a 32 Magnum out now if they feel like they need a little more oomph. As far as a man is concerned, I'm still going to stick with the double action revolver, and for both of them for the same reasons. One, it's much safer. You know whether it's ready to shoot because you have to pull the trigger before it shoots. That's one of the things. Of course, with the automatic, you got a safety on it, you got a hammer or not. Some of them don't have a hammer even, so you can see whether it's cocked. You don't have the assurance of what you've got there. But the main thing is that business of being able to continue pulling the trigger and coming up with a fresh round. It's the gun that works out best for the person who is not an expert. They got the cart before the horse is what's happening. The person who is not an expert should definitely have a double action revolver. The person who is an expert might get by all right with the automatic if he knows that gun completely, except for that one thing. No second chance.
Well, those of
That's
us,
where the name of that book came from. No second place winner, because no second place winner in a gunfight. You win or you lose.
well, those of us who read Bill Jordan's columns regularly are aware of his feeling over the revolver versus semi-automatic, and certainly semi-automatics have their place, but I tend to agree with him. I trust and prefer the revolvers for home defense. If I could just have one gun, I believe it would be a revolver, probably a .357, and I'm sure he feels that same way.
Let me say just one more thing before you. If I had to go into a fight and I had nothing but an automatic, I wouldn't feel undressed. I'd go ahead with it. As a matter of fact, I have quite often carried an extra gun in my hip pocket. On my hip in the holster was a double-action revolver. That was the number 1 boy. Number 2 boy in a hip pocket in case I ran out of ammunition in that first one. Normally, if I ran out of ammunition, I'd figure it's time to go somewhere else and think about it and then reload.
Reconsider and reload.
Somewhere else.
Well, this is certainly good advice for all of us. Again, Mr. Bill Jordan has seen a lot of confrontations and things that most of us, thankfully, will never see, but he certainly has the experience to back up his advice.